we understand what a big breath is, right? If you're saying take a deep breath, and I'm hearing taking the deep breath are connected and they are the same, then it's helpful. But again, for most people, taking a deep breath would be a chest breathing up here. I'm maybe scrunching up my shoulders, actually activating sympathetic response, and I'm gonna end up holding my breath. Where that is, again, is exact opposite what you want to do.
Awesome. Well, Gabor, absolutely welcome to our show. You're totally stoked about what you do, how you do it, in what detail you go within these areas that I mentioned just a minute ago: breathwork, yoga, mindfulness, all of that within your company, Breathlete, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, well, first of all, thanks for inviting me in. I'm pretty honored to be the first guest on this amazing show, and
first one.
And of course, I have a lot of respect for what you all do. And I'm super interested and excited that that you all are thinking about breathwork being incorporated into what you all do, and working with populations that probably really need and can take advantage of a lot of these techniques beyond, also in addition to what you all do. So I'm really excited. But yeah, like you mentioned, my company is named Breathlete, and I do a lot of different things. I teach yoga, and I'm an outdoor educator. But for this project that I started just about a year ago, and actually really went kind of full time with it with the pandemic, what I focus on is working with high performers, specifically athletes in this scenario, but not just athletes, but high performance of all disciplines, and sharing the tools of what I call the 3 pillars, which is breathwork, yoga, mindful movement, in other words, and meditation. But really, the reason why the company is actually called Breathlete, because breathwork really is, to me, the foundation for all those other aspects, right? I tell folks all the time that you know, in my opinion, yoga is nothing but moving meditation, where you use breath as a vehicle for your movement. Whereas in all mindfulness practices, meditation, you know, are foundationed and based upon breathing, right? It doesn't matter what tradition, what discipline of mindfulness or meditation you follow. Most likely, the first thing that they show you and teach you and ask you to focus on once you're trying to get into meditation is the breath. And really, and I'm sure we can talk a lot more about it, why that is. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, it's Breathlete with three pillars, with breathwork being the most foundational of them.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, because I personally have some experience with mindfulness training, specifically one of the trainings in Japan. And to be honest with you, and hopefully we will get there a little bit more in detail a little bit later, but one of the things that I realized is that it helps you and makes you focus on breath, but it doesn't tell you much about how to breathe. And the breath work, as I understand it now better, is more about also the technique of breathing, which has a direct impact on self-regulation, the physiology of your body, that then affects your mental state, right? So that's something I find super fascinating, honestly. Something I'm curious about is how do you utilize the breath work with your clients and within your company, where you have also the other areas that you focus on?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And really, like you said, you know, often I think part of the reason why, You know, to me, breathwork is the entry point to any of these other disciplines, and really, and the reason being, it is our breath is nothing but the connection between our body and our mind. Yeah, and then any you know, internally focused meditative practices or mind-body practices will have a version of saying that in their own way, right? Martial arts will say that, you know, ki or chi follows the breath. You know, in yoga, they say where your mind goes, there goes prana, life force. And really we can, and those are kind of often these sayings don't tell you much about, like you said, don't really explain how or why. And I think this is why this field is becoming so exciting, because now, you know, the Western science, measurable, you know, Western science is catching up to these ancient practices where you can actually explain to clients of how and why these things work. And like you asked the question, and how I utilize it in my approach working with athletes is, to me, like you mentioned, often even meditative practices, they tell you to focus on the breath, but they don't really explain much about how to do it. And that's kind of a bummer, right? Because there's so much potential in that. And what I aim to do with my clients is really show them and teach them how to use their breath depending on the situation and depending on the outcome that they desire, right? And this is kind of where it also ties into the topic of that you all always focus on, or the kind of the hallmark of your activities, resilience. It allows you to be resilient in the singular moments of adversity, right? But it also creates resilience long term. And of course, when you work with athletes, both of those are incredibly important. You are going to have to be able to respond to the situation at hand when you're dealing with stress. But then, of course, there's the accumulative effects of stress of days, years, months, you know, of accumulating effects on your body and on your psyche. And that's so I like to start by focusing on the foundations of breathing. And to explain why is what I like to tell folks. It's that's out of the three pillars I like to call, again, mindful movement, meditation, and breath work. In my opinion, breathwork is the one that has what I like to call the biggest ROI, the biggest return on investment, right? And the reason being is, number one, the techniques are incredibly simple. They're not easy, but they're simple in execution. You're not dealing with esoteric concepts, right? They're very accessible, right? It's if you have a set of lungs, you are able to do them. No equipment required. They are available. They are with you 24/7. You know, the first thing that you come in to do when you come into this world is you take an inhale. You know, the last thing that you do before you pass on is take an exhale. But in between, you know, we breathe, like you all mentioned, anywhere between 17 to 30,000 times a day, depending on your fitness level, your respiratory health, and some other factors. But often people don't really talk about how to take those you know, potentially 30,000 breaths a day. So it's available, accessible, it's simple, but also because it has immediate impacts, right? It is so tied to our anatomy and our biochemistry that even the tiniest little changes will have immediate impacts on you. And that's really really easy to observe and really easy to understand. And people that work with their bodies a lot probably intuitively understand that a little bit. So even making the smallest of changes can have a big impact on your body. And we can talk about that if you all are wanting to, or why that happens and how that happens.
Yeah, I love what you said about that, especially with the fact that that breath is something that's always with us. So if we can implement that properly, we can see changes immediately. And I think that's something that Barbara and I really try to stress and get across to, you know, clients we've worked with, as we even, you know, implemented into the online training courses that we have created and are going to create as well, where we put breath in there. This is something you can do as you're taking this class or right after. Immediate impacts. So can you speak to some of those effects, those impacts, what we would see?
Yeah, so you know, like I said, you know, breath is what maybe in a little more esoteric way they say it's a connection between the body and the mind, but really from a Western scientific understanding, it truly is, and the reason being, it's because it's incredibly well connected to, and I'm not scientist, I know enough of this topic that I utilize in my work, but I'm sure there's plenty of people that are doctors and scientists that have a way better understanding than I do. But my understanding is that it's connected to the autonomic nervous system, which has two parts, right? The sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system being kind of like, imagine gas pedal in your body that moves you towards activity, or most people are familiar with the term of fight or flight response in our body, versus the parasympathetic is kind of like the brake pedal in our system, in our nervous system, that brings us towards rest and digest, and kind of calms our body down. And these two, of course, work in tandem, right? It's not that we want more of one than the other. They are kind of in constant movement, like teeter-tottering between one another. And how that happens is actually through the breath. Every inhale that we take is like ever so slightly triggers the sympathetic response in our body, and every exhale that we take triggers the parasympathetic response in our body. And even if we just understand that tiny little bit, that in itself can be a huge tool, because we know that when our sympathetic nervous system fires, or that's the response that we get, then our heart rate elevates, our blood pressure gets higher, and this is when our breath is usually shallow and quick when we're going through activity, and that's when stress hormones are getting released in our body, right? Adrenaline, cortisol, and all those things. Now, when we're exhaling and focusing on the exhale, then the opposite happens. We lower our heart rate, our blood pressure lowers, and hormones and get released in the body that move us towards relaxation, rest, and digest. So even just by playing with that, we can get incredible results. And of course, it's very, again, it's not something that we need to believe in, right? If you do very, very simple exercises, you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, like that's exactly what happens. Try to hold your breath for a long time, you're gonna start to get agitated, you know. But if you elongate your exhale quite a bit longer, just doesn't matter how long is your inhale, but if your exhale is longer than your inhale, it is going to, you can't even help it. That's how your body is wired to do. And, you know, people say from an evolutionary standpoint, right? Like when you were back in the day, a lion was chasing you down, you needed that sympathetic response, right? That you needed, you know, your body to flush you with those hormones so you can run away, fight or flight. But where the problem comes in often, especially for folks that are working in stressful situations, is, you know, my understanding that the sympathetic response is designed for short bursts, to give you that short burst of energy so you can get yourself out of the situation. Whereas in our current lifestyle, and especially I'm sure for first responders can relate to this, you know, we are designed to get that quick burst and then recover quickly from that. Whereas for us, with our lifestyle, often we just get this constant drip of, you know, sympathetic response that gets you into a state of chronic stress. I don't know if I totally answered the question, but.
No, you did. And I love where you went with it, with regards to the short bursts and, you know, our current lifestyle now. You know, we maybe hold on to those hormones a little bit longer because we're not utilizing it in the same way that it was utilized in the past of getting away from that immediate danger and saving our lives. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop there and look at Barbara to see what she has.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what stood out to me particularly, and maybe Brian will be able to speak to that a little bit more because he was in the high-risk occupations. But you know, as I think of firefighters, they have just a finite amount of air when they are in the burning building, and something we are doing when we are stressed out, not only within these situations, but just in life situations, as a general population, is that we are hyperventilating, right? Our breathing is just not efficient, and that's something I found in the book Breathing for Warriors that you actually recommended to us to read. Amazing book, so I cannot recommend to anyone else. But that's exactly what is happening also in these situations. Like, you are so aroused and activated that you also don't think about how you are breathing in that situation, but maybe that training can also help you to function in those situations in a default way. And the training helps you to get into or build that default, the proper default that will actually work well within those stressful situations.
Yeah, I think what I think you said a couple of really important things, and one thing that stood out to me, and this is kind of how I approach it in my work too, with working with athletes and business professionals, is this is another reason why I think breathwork in itself is such an amazing foundational skill set to develop, because it gives you an exact tool, or it gives you something very specific that you can tune in with, right? Often, you know, when folks give you advice to, you know, like, wow, before you send that, you know, nasty email, or before you say that word, just bite your tongue, or, you know, or like kind of give these vague, you know, things, or like just take a deep breath. Well, we can talk more about this when we come to the myths, but, you know, if it doesn't really give you the exact specifics that you need to do, when we say like, well, actually elongate your exhale, you know, keep your exhale longer than your inhale, that will calm you down. If you just take a deep breath and hold your breath in, well, it actually is going to do the exact opposite. It's going to elevate your heart rate and your blood pressure. So that's kind of a health truth there. But again, we can give folks these specific tools that they can immediately tune in. And again, our breath is always with us. It's an easy, it's not, I guess I shouldn't say easy, but it's a thing that it's intuitively we can tap into and work with. And the other thing that you mentioned that I like to say all the time is that, of course, it all comes down to practice, and that's what I emphasize. You know, practice is basically one of my favorite, all-time favorite words in the dictionary. It really comes down to practice, because, you know, again, similar to if someone tells you like, well, next time you get mad, just do this one thing. Well, when you're mad, the last thing that you're going to think of is to do that one thing, even if that one thing is simple. So I like to emphasize a lot that any and all of these techniques require a lot of practice to be able to take advantage of. So you can, and it's just like any other skill set, right? I'm sure firefighters, you know, drill their, you know, all their skills day in, day out. So when the situation comes, they can reach to that and don't have to think about it. It becomes automatic. And I always like to say too that, you know, knowing the information is not enough. Often, actually, in my opinion, knowing the information but not practicing is actually almost detrimental, because then you know what you're supposed to do, but you don't do it, and then it comes, you know, with the sense of guilt and frustration with it. So I don't know if I would go as far as to say that ignorance is bliss, but, you know, if you know the information, internalize it and absolutely practice so you can implement that.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I can speak from my experience, honestly. It's been a while we've been in touch for the first time, and we really shifted our focus into breath, and personally myself, with some experience on mindfulness and how as you said, it's a little bit abstract and slightly philosophical, even though that's not necessarily bad, but it's sometimes just difficult to understand these concepts without the pure direct experience. And it seems that the breath also is that pure direct experience. And back to what you just said, the importance of practice. Honestly, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? I went on a trip. Yep. I was driving. Yeah. I started breathing as I'm driving anywhere. Honestly, to work, from work. Yesterday I went to the mountains, so an hour-long drive where I really could focus on audiobook, but also on my breath. And I can tell you, it's been one of the first times where I felt calm and alert at the same time, which is a concept within mindfulness where you are just at the right place with your arousal. Yeah, you're not super calm because when you have to perform, you have to be, you don't want to be like just totally relaxed, right? And that have a significant impact on my ability to concentrate. I literally was just, driving and just totally in the present moment, focusing on what is happening and paying attention to every single detail that was happening around me. Yeah. And the breathwork was the gate for me, the way, the bridge towards that. And a great example, great personal experience that I will definitely remember and keep it as a motivation for me to keep working on that and keep exploring it. But it took a little bit to practice that and get really into the state where I could apply it, and within maybe just 10 seconds I felt a significant difference. Yeah, so that's extremely interesting for me.
Yeah. And I just want to say, absolutely appreciate you hitting on the whole practice piece, because that's something we stress throughout all we do. Practice, practice, practice. And beautifully said. I got nothing else on that in that regard. When you were talking about it, Gabor, it's like hearing us talk about it again. We want you all to practice out there. If you're going through our training, practice those techniques. You may not feel it the first time, but we emphasize sticking with it and continuing to practice, because at some point, whatever it is that we're talking about and here today's breath, it's going to click, you're going to feel something, and that's where you're making that progress, and that's what we want to see. But you're never going to get there if you don't practice it. So now you touched on it earlier. You said getting into the myths. I feel like I'm sitting here between two absolute breath experts, and I'll put you both in that category, because I am, given my experience, something that Barbara and I talk about a lot is I come from the military high-risk occupations background, and to be completely honest, these are things that I didn't readily know at the time to do, being deployed in a combat environment, and you're facing stress and fear and an enemy every day. However, with Barbara's example right now, had either myself or even my soldiers implemented some of these things, you can tune in that much better to the threats that are out there, for example, which is, I think, very similar to first responder community out there, and the idea of being able to be calm but alert to what's going on, firefighter, law enforcement, paramedic, implementing life-saving procedures and all that such. But and so for me, as still, I would say, a relative newbie here to breath, what's one of those myths out there that one or two myths even that you know about that you would love to debunk here today?
Well, first of all, thanks for the kind words. I definitely wouldn't necessarily put myself in the category that you put me, but very nice. I mean, I think I'll get to your question in 1 second, but before doing that, I think I'd like to make the point too that breath work really is a topic of infinite depth. It really, really is. There's a lot of them are simple concepts, but to really to master, you know, your own breath. I mean, I know I'm gonna be doing that for the rest of my life. And you know, with that, I've sort of like to say that to kind of like, if you venture down this path is to be patient with yourself, but I will also say is I think that's what's the beauty of breath work. There's a lot of our skill development, of course it's a skill that we need to develop, but a lot of it takes really kind of a long time to realize benefits, right? And this is kind of where I put breath work in the middle of my pillars. It's a pinnacle experience. Let's say, you know, again, mindfulness and meditation. I've been a regular meditation practitioner for well over a decade, but to really get some of those benefits that are completely undoubtable, it's their 100% work. It takes some time until you realize the benefits. Same goes with mindful movement and yoga. You know, it will take a little bit, or often quite a long time, to realize the actual benefits. It's not to say that they don't work, but for you to really become face to face with it, like, okay, yeah, this is what is actually happening, and this is the benefit I'm receiving. It takes some time, but I do think that breath actually is a little bit set apart from these two, and this is why I like to start working with the breath, whatever client I work with, because again, it has immediate impacts. And you know, maybe at the end of this session we can even just do like maybe a minute or two to realize that that yes, it actually does have immediate, and we say immediate impacts on how we feel, how we perceive the world, and how we can respond, not react. And that's kind of what, you know, in my understanding is the point of all mindfulness and mind body disciplines, is to create a little bit of distance between us and the situation, right? It's we're creating space, and you create space in yoga, in your body, you create space in breath work, between your inhales, your exhales, elongating the exhales. But in mindfulness, you create a space between you and the situation. There's this beautiful expression in Eastern teachings that we are like a bull with a ring in our nose that are just, and the ring is our emotions. We are being dragged around based on our emotions, right? And mindfulness allows not to do that, to take a step away and see the situation. And the breath will allow us to do that we can step back a little bit and respond to the situation versus reacting colored by our emotion. Right, and I think that's probably incredibly important for people that work in fields where you really actually you deal with life and death situation, whether it's your own, your team members, or your patients. But to get to the myths, you know, there's a lot of them out there. You know, the one who I'm like, just take a deep breath, I think is one of the one that everyone knows. Like everyone's parents told you that when you're like getting frustrated, just take a deep breath. Which a deep breath is good if you know, if you have the same mental model, if you understand what a big breath is, right? If you're saying take a deep breath, and I'm hearing taking the deep breath are connected and they are the same, then it's helpful. But again, for most people, taking a deep breath would be a chest breathing up here. I'm maybe scrunching up my shoulders, actually activating sympathetic response, and I'm gonna end up holding my breath, where that is, again, it's exact opposite what you want to do. You end up activating your vagus nerve in the area of the vagus nerve that puts you into the flight or flight. So to take a deep breath, I like to say, it's don't take a deep breath, elongate your exhale. So that's kind of one. And another one, which kind of goes a little bit along similar lines, is what a big breath even looks like. And this comes from modeling, you know, not modeling the profession, but modeling as far as what we see around us. And one of my great teachers, Dr. Belissa, Vranich, who's a book you earlier referenced, says this all the time. In our culture, when you see taking a deep breath, what that means, whether it's in cartoons, in commercials, what you see is people expanding their chest, right? It's like a very like a lungy type performative action, whereas and what we call that in the field, that's like a vertical breath, right? Like you're kind of in breathing right here, clavicle chest breathing, which is not what you want to do. What you want to do is breathe what we call horizontally through your belly, expanding the lower part of your body versus the chest. So when you see cartoons like Superman, chest up, like broad shoulders, Popeye, or air freshener commercial, like someone sprays and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just taking a big breath. Well, that's to me, that's one of the myths of what a big breath is or a deep breath is. But yeah, and I guess the last thing that we can kind of dive into this a little bit more is this is not so much a myth, but I think it's a huge sense of confusion and of now that breathwork is becoming its own discipline and everybody thankfully is starting to a little bit engaging with the breath, or at least in the performance aspect of things, you hear a lot of different information, a lot of different techniques that often seem very, very conflicting, right? Between everyone knows who Wim Hof is, or most of us know who Wim Hof is, Wim Hof breathing, Wim Hof method, which is amazing in its own right, and it's right there. But then you hear someone like Patrick McHugh and Oxygen Advantage, and you compare the two things, and you're almost like, wow, that doesn't make sense. Like it almost seems like they're like counterintuitive, which going against each other, which really isn't. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I think it's really important that when we look at techniques and methodologies to be able to place them in the right category of what is the goal, where is this teaching and technique coming from. And I look at this in almost like creating 4 different buckets, right? If like techniques fall into buckets, the first one would be what is an optimal breathing pattern for everyday life, right? Like and that would be the diaphragmatic lower body horizontal breath, right? So there's techniques to help you do that and develop that diaphragmatic breathing. Then there's a second bucket of developing an optimal breathing pattern for the activity that you're trying to do, right? And this is often I deal with this with my clients coming from different athletic disciplines, right? And it's probably, we don't have to be breathing experts to understand that optimal breathing pattern for an activity like weightlifting would be very different from optimal breathing pattern for a triathlete or a marathon runner, which again would be very, very different from a golfer that is trying to putt or someone that is trying to shoot a target, right? So that first category, again, optimal breathing pattern for life and health, optimal breathing pattern for the movement patterns and activity that you're trying to execute. And then in the third bucket, I like to put like the training wheels, right? There's different exercises that can help you in either these, like either help you develop the optimal breathing pattern here or the optimal breathing pattern for your activity. And I like to compare that almost, come from a tennis background of putting weights on your tennis racket and you just do shadow tennis and practice, with weights on your racket. Well, no one would expect you, hopefully, to get out on the court and try to play a match with weight on your racket or, using resistance bands for a movement so then you can do the movement pattern without the resistance band kind of thing. So that would be category 3. And then category 4 would be in my book is techniques for desired outcomes. Like when I'm actually trying to get something out of my technique, whether it's I'm trying to calm down, whether I'm trying to amp myself up, get ready for a situation, move towards activity, or even for physical limitations. For asthmatics, different breathing pattern would be like getting over an asthma attack, or or letting go of pent up emotions. There's the breathing techniques where it's a therapeutic, almost like a psychological release that we're trying to get an outcome based on that. So, but I think it's important to understand, especially for folks that are just diving into this, because you know, you'll see a YouTube video or see someone doing something and you're like, oh, that's really, really cool. And then you see another YouTube video, it's like, now I don't understand how these two fit together because they almost seem like they
contradict.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point.
Sorry, that was many words, but I always want to make sure that I can get that message kind of across.